It felt like such a waste, and it didn't need to happen. This person's just, going about their business, just cycling down this country road on a beautiful sunny day, and then all of a sudden, they're dead. I just had this feeling that whoever did it would have been thinking, those country coppers aren't going to solve this. They're not going to know where to look. I'll get away with it.
I remember thinking, not on my watch. Do you get involved in these towns and these communities and you really want to do the right thing by them? And that's what we did.
When the news finally came through that police had found a likely culprit, I guess I was incredulous. They also pointed out that he had previously been known to them from another episode in his past history.
It was just an astonishing coincidence that the same man that police were alleging had run down Dr Martin Pearson was the same man who had been involved in such a mysterious death almost 6 years to the day before.
We're talking about the death of a woman who's been shot in the back at point-blank range with a shotgun. And the law says it is unlawful to kill another person.
There are two tragedies. They're connected by one person, and I think the truth needs to be known.
I first heard of this case in 2011 when I was a coroner. At the time, I was engaged in other matters, but this kept bubbling in the back of my mind. This strikes at the very heart of justice. A woman's been dead for 12 years. Nothing's been done.
I can understand why John is so concerned, because not only did he practice in crime as both prosecutor and defence counsel, he was a state coroner. He wants this woman to have accorded to her the due process of law.
Well, the coroner made an open finding, but to resolve the matter properly, it should be resolved in a court of law. It really is a jury question. That's the way we run our society. Had he been prosecuted for the killing of his wife, and had he been convicted, then he may very well not have been on the road at the time Dr. Pearson was killed. That is the bitter irony, and no doubt that irony resonates within the Pearson family.
Martin and Sandy had a lovely house in a small acreage at Lowood, just on the rural fringe of Brisbane to the west. And it was quite convenient because it was not too far for Martin to cycle to work out at the veterinary hospital at Gatton.
Martin was very fit and very healthy. He was the sort of person, his favourite food was broccoli, which I find extraordinary. Martin loved to challenge himself, and part of that was cycling very long distances.
He wasn't a particularly fast rider, but he was a guy that could, when he got him on a bike, he could just keep riding and riding.
Martin rode the Edinburgh-London Audax 2 times.
Good morning.
He was well known throughout the circuit, throughout Australia and in Europe.
How's the ride going, okay?
Yeah, it'd be nice to finish.
I'm not sure it will be.
Everything hurts at this point.
We're very different from Australia, obviously.
Yes.
The ride that Martin was involved in April 2014 was called the Gran Turismo series. That was a series of 4 rides, a 200, a 300, a 400 and a 600 kilometre ride over 9 days.
So Martin and his wife Sandy, they were ride organisers. Him and Sandy would try to find quiet roads with not much traffic on them.
And you look at, there's a taillight there, reflective tape on the back here. I've never seen somebody have so many flashing lights and GPSs and you name it. Martin had everything that there was to have for a bike that made it as safe as possible.
All his jerseys were
Incredibly
bright.
vivid.
Yeah.
He really did everything that you could. That was his nature.
On the morning of Anzac Day in 2014, we started off from Tenterfield to head to Dalby. It was a very clear day. It was reasonably quiet. There was very little traffic.
There were 5 riders doing the series. I was doing some support in terms of food and drinks.
So she would travel to the food stop. She would get there before us, feed you, and away we'd go.
I saw them at Stanthorpe, which was the first checkpoint for the day. And then I packed up and then went to Inglewood.
I got there, spent maybe half an hour there eating, and then I left to go up Millmerran Road. I remember it just being a long, straight road. It was pretty, I felt pretty safe on it.
Martin arrived. He was in great spirits, actually. He was looking forward to the last bit of the ride to get home, and so he was feeling very pleased with himself. And we put on sunscreen. We sat around, just general chit chat about the day and about getting to Dalby, really. And then he headed off. I headed off, and quite soon I passed the 4th and 5th riders. They gave me a wave. I sort of was thinking that I should be seeing Martin, that I should come across him, because normally I'd pass everybody along the way, and then I didn't see him. And that didn't cause me too much thought, other than I thought that, well, he must have stopped or been off towards the side of the road or something like that. So I just assumed I had missed him.
I was the officer in charge of Inglewood Police Station. We've got 3 officers stationed here. We all went to the Anzac Day Parade in the morning, and I got a call later on that afternoon from one of my officers at the station, and that was Senior Constable Matt Shaw, who told me that an accident had happened, and there was a bicycle rider that had been hit by an unknown vehicle.
It was a crystal clear blue, beautiful autumn day. The shadows had only just started coming over the road, so the visibility would have been really good. When I got there, it was pretty horrific. The impact area was here, just before the post. There would have been an explosion of material on impact. The bike and the cyclist had gone pretty much straight in that direction. There was stuff everywhere. There was sunglasses and drink bottles and bits and pieces all over the place.
It's consistent with being clipped on the left of a vehicle, so because everything's gone to that left-hand side of the road.
The bike was entangled in the fence. Pretty much in between these 2 posts. And just before that was Martin.
It just gives you some idea of the force, I suppose, that happened on that day. You've got vehicles travelling at 100 kilometres per hour. And it's a fair distance for a bike and all equipment to go.
It's a good 30 to 40 metres from the impact to this point. The 2 cyclists that I'd passed arrived at the scene. We tried to stop them pretty quickly before, they got anywhere into the area. So what I did do is I did tell them what had happened. I said that there's a cyclist that is deceased. And straight away, one of the cyclists said, I hope it's not Martin.
I got a phone call from one of the riders who said, did I know where all the riders were? And so I started heading back and came across the scene. So Martin's bike was up on the fence And so it's up on the fence, and he was on the ground, covered. So it was clear it was him. Yes.
You're just thinking to yourself, what's happened? Like, where's the driver? Why didn't they stop? And there's always the assumption that they didn't know that they'd hit something, but it appeared to me that you would have to know. I mean, the amount of gear that went flying and the fact that the rear wheel was found on the opposite side of the road, 40 to 50 metres from the impact position, would have been going at, I would have assumed, at a fair speed and across the driver's sight line.
What would normally happen is a forensic traffic crash investigator would investigate a fatal traffic crash. We were able to get one out to map the scene, however, they weren't available to take that investigation any further, which left it basically in our hands. The enormity of it was daunting, don't get me wrong.
Tim and Matt were certainly very good at investigating traffic crashes, but traditional traffic crashes, where it becomes particularly complex is when you don't know the second party that's involved. I remember saying to Matt, I don't know how we're going to solve this one.
We're in a remote area, which makes it more difficult. We haven't got the resources of a big city. So we've got to make do ourselves in circumstances like this.
The Inglewood-Millmerran Road is a very, very isolated country road. It's very probable that no one saw it, apart from the driver.
It was a needle in the haystack. A lot of people said, you'll never get them. There's no way. Unless someone talks or anything, you'll never identify whatever collided with the cyclist. And deep down, I probably thought, well, maybe we won't, but let's give it a red-hot go. I just think that was the right thing to do. There was two critical elements at the scene. One was a shoe of the bicycle rider. There was a blue mark on the back of the heel of that shoe.
Martin was meticulous. He didn't appear to have anything that wasn't really well maintained. So I contacted Sandy. She said that blue mark wasn't there when she last saw him.
And the other one was the spotlight, which wasn't relevant to Martin's gear or anything like that.
I've never seen a spotlight that large on a small car. So I'm thinking we've got a truck or a four-wheel drive of some type. The cover of the spotlight was sitting precariously in this long grass, like right on the top of it, like it had just been placed there. And that had light force written on it.
The wife of a cyclist killed in a hit-and-run accident on Friday says the driver must come forward.
We had been told that the greatest chance of success of finding a driver was if it happened very early, and that the longer that it went on, the less chance that there would be that the driver may be identified.
Any information that you may know, however insignificant it may seem, may help. Martin was very dear to us.
Anyone that may have a light force spotlight missing from their vehicle to once again contact police.
Lots of drivers came forward, but no, the driver who had been responsible didn't come forward.
I needed to know as much as I possibly could about what had happened to him. And so I was walking around the streets looking at every four-wheel drive and truck to see if they were missing a driving light, and especially if they were blue, and scouring every bit of internet, and every time I saw a blue truck, I was thinking, is that it, is that it? I just look at the bull bar on the front and think that's where Martin ended his life. This is a novel way of moving a patient from the anaesthesia bay to the operating table.
So you don't do that with people?
No, upside down, suspended from the ceiling, no.
Of the many things that I valued about Martin was that I loved his quirky sense of humour, and that he was a person who was very strong in his faith and strong in his character. He was a very moral person.
We think, oh, gee, the dog's got into the house. And he said, oh, no, the sheep got into the house. The sheep walked through his house. Martin was an amazing vet and well respected throughout veterinary circles.
The polar bear.
He did a PhD in veterinary anaesthesia when Australia was very devoid of specialist veterinary anaesthetists.
Doing the elephant at Taronga.
The irony, I think, is huge of a vet being left as roadkill on Anzac Day, of all days, the day that Australia commemorates mateship and courage.
We had CCTV footage in town here at the service station. Unfortunately, it didn't give us the whole road. It only gave us the bottom half of the vehicle. And we were trying to identify if there was a four-wheel drive or a truck with that sort of spotlight on coming through, and that had led nowhere. We were at a dead end until we realised that there were some traffic counters nearly 8 kilometres down the road from the accident. I never knew. Been in the job for 30 years, I never knew what traffic counters actually recorded. Lo and behold, we actually found out they give us a lot of information. They're satellite time, so the times on there are so accurate. They give speeds of vehicles, they give a number of axles in that vehicle and how far they are apart. This was going to be beyond what we could provide as a 3-person station in a little country town. So we had requested assistance.
I was Detective Sergeant at the Warwick CRB at the time, tasked to go to Inglewood. Tim and Matt showed me the traffic counter, and they told me that a GPS had been located at the scene on Dr Pearson's bike. It's a cycling type GPS. If the GPS was turned on at the time of the accident, there may be a track log available to analyse and see, the time that the accident could have occurred. The GPS was in fact recording a track log for that day. It's quite dramatic on the graph. You can clearly see a deceleration event from Dr Pearson's average speed of about 20 to 30 kilometres an hour throughout that day. It changes, then goes to 0. The last speed recorded by the GPS is at 3:14 and 43 seconds, and that is in fact the time of the accident.
Now we could match a vehicle off that traffic counter to when the accident occurred.
So this vehicle's travelling north.
Yep.
It passes over the traffic counter at 3:09 and 51 seconds.
Yep. And it's doing 90 kilometres per hour.
So that actually puts it right at the incident scene, right at the time. So it was one particular night I was working by myself. It was about 9 p.m. and I just thought, well, I'll go back through this CCTV footage based on the new time. And I saw the truck. And I just remember thinking to myself, that's the truck. It can't be anything else. Like, that's the exact axle combination that I've told's rare, and it's coming through in the exact time that it needed to come through to be at the traffic counter and then travelling at that speed to be at the incident scene. So I remember I rang Tim. My words were something like, I found the truck. And I think his words were, you have not. That's definitely the truck. And I think he was there within a minute or two. But that axle combination, you could see the wheels and the axle combination, and that it had grain bins as the trailer.
So what we've got is someone who's working on Anzac Day, carting grain on that day. We've got to find out what truck it is from those steps.
Yeah, that's pretty unique.
So we got onto the computers then, and we're trying to identify what sort of truck it was.
See that? That's the same.
It's exactly the same as that. We both virtually went, it's an Argosy Freightliner for sure.
That's great.
I do a search on the Department of Transport records for a Argosy Freightliner tip truck that's white in colour. And I got 3 hits. One was registered to a driver in Rockhampton. Two of them were registered to a Jeffrey Sleeber in Toowoomba, Kingsthorpe. That's the first time that I heard the name Jeffrey Sleeber.
Jeffrey Sleeber was one of the owners of Sleeber Farming, are a privately owned grain storage facility at Kingsthorpe between Oakey and Toowoomba. And Jeff, he was responsible for organising the pickup of grain.
I looked up the truck registration to see whether there'd been any previous traffic tickets and if there was anyone else driving that truck. And all the information confirmed that Jeffrey Sleeber was the driver. Further investigation showed that he'd been involved in a shooting incident 6 years earlier, around about the same date, around about Anzac Day, that he'd accidentally shot his wife at their home.
Leanne Sleeber died 5 days before her 34th birthday. Her husband killed her. His grief is indescribable.
I'm trying to hold together as best as we can in this tough time.
But that didn't mean anything to my investigation. It certainly didn't mean that I had a personal opinion about him.
If you see a silo, yell it out. I'll look it up on our system.
We knew that that particular truck would have had to have loaded in the Yallarbin area, which is half an hour to the west of Inglewood. There's a few grain properties on Merton Road. I Google mapped any farm that had a grain silo and then called the farmer to see whether they'd had a pickup of grain that day.
And we'd gone through probably about 5 or 6 properties only. Hello, it's Sergeant. I spoke to a farmer and he goes, yep, we were carting grain out on Anzac Day. And I said, can you tell me who was carting grain for you on that day? And I specifically remember, he said Jeffrey Sleeber was carting grain on that day and his company was carting grain from that day. And it still gets hairs going on the back of my neck because it was like we've done it.
We had a truck that we now were almost convinced was the truck that we were looking for. What we were lacking was absolute proof that that truck had collided with Dr Pearson and his bicycle.
Sleeber Farming trucks would travel to the Brisbane port on a regular basis, so we sought footage of that truck.
The vehicle that they suspected was involved was filmed the day before the crash with 2 spotlights and was filmed 2 days later, the same location, with no spotlights. What it says is that someone has changed those spotlights. Somebody removed the spotlights from somewhere between the day before the crash and 2 days after it, and then someone replaced those spotlights.
I got the crime scene warrant for the truck. I got a search warrant for Jeffrey's house and a search warrant for Sleeber Farming. And we intercepted the truck pulling into a grain facility. And I've approached Jeffrey Sleeber and given him his warnings and cautions and explained to him that I was investigating the death of Martin Pearson on Anzac Day. He wasn't emotional, he didn't get upset. The only thing he basically did say to me is, I don't really know what you're talking about.
And I remember looking at the front of that truck and seeing the mud flaps of the truck with this blue border on it. And I actually took a photo of it and sent it off to Matt and said, this is the blue.
I then asked Jeff to accompany us back so that we could execute the search warrant back at his house. And then during that search, a identical light was found that matched the light that was left at the scene. I'm thinking that this is the truck that's left that light and that Jeffrey's removed the remaining light in an attempt to disguise the fact that he's been involved.
About a month later, Ryan said that they had sufficient evidence to prefer charges. And I went along and Jeffrey Sleeber was arrested.
It was just relief. There was still the person that died. It wasn't going to bring Martin back. For me, it just felt that the puzzle was finished and that there was relief that there may be some justice for Martin and his family.
When the news finally came through that the police had arrested a suspect, I remember feeling so shaky and teary and, I don't know, just... They'd done the impossible. How can that be? But they did. So it wasn't impossible, it just was close to it.
All the police had told me was his name, and then I started getting calls from people who live up that way. They told me about what had happened to his first wife.
Why would you be looking for a snake on a cold night? Why was there someone standing in front of a loaded firearm? Why would you have your finger on the trigger?
From the beginning, it just didn't sound right. It doesn't pass the common sense test.
People were saying, oh, he's killed once before, now he's killed again. I think we were all expected that Sleeper was going to get off.
Jeffrey really summed up his version by saying that I didn't hit a cyclist and that if I did, I can't remember.
The defence was that he may have had a micro-sleep.
I stewed on this matter. This has become a passion of mine to see it resolved one way or the other.